Hi, friends. Welcome back. And today we have a special treat. I think that it's trick or treat season here, at least in North America. So we talk a lot about tricks or treats, but this one human, I think, certainly is on the treat side. And I'm sure you recognize her, but for those of you that do not, we have Laura Krauss here today. And Laura has all sorts of amazing happening. She has a whole community to help people that are dealing with, I'll call it the layoff pandemic that's happening in tech, right? And I'm sure you've discovered that in your research, Laura. She's also got a book coming out, which I just cannot talk about enough, on November the 5th. And she can share all that fantastic with us. But it's basically the Layoff. Cooties is the name of this. It's not them, or it's them, not you. And that's such a powerful message. Laura knows, and as well as all of you, on my personal experiences with Layoff inside of tech. Laura has also been a global sales executive. I should mention this. She's worked for companies like SAP and then some that will not be named. But Laura, welcome. I'm so excited that you're here.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. I hope that people get more treats than tricks out of this message today.
Yes. Um, so, Laura, I think one of the things that I would really love to have you share, if you don't mind, is just your journey, because so many people are listening to this that have sales, customer success, kind of go to market aspirations, or maybe they're in a job transition or they've been laid off, right? I mean, all you have to do is look up Forbes and you see, Intel, Cisco, these huge portions of workforce are having mass corporate wide layoffs. So love to know how that kind of resonates with you and your story.
Yeah, absolutely. A year ago today, if you would have told me that I would be on podcast talking about a book that I wrote, and let alone about the topics of layoffs, I would have told you were crazy. I was literally right in the midst of my dream job. I was a regional vice president of sales working for a global, well-known SaaS company who, as you mentioned, will not be mentioned. By name. I was leading my best life, doing all the things that I wanted to be doing, both professionally and personally, at age 45. 25 years in sales, the last 10 in tech specifically. And I was part of a blindsiding layoff last November 29th, 2023. It was the farthest thing ever from my mind, even though I knew it was happening throughout the industry and throughout other verticals as well. But it's not something that I ever thought would ever be part of my storied career. And I think until it happens to you, whether you're 35, 45, or 55, you never can really appreciate just the emotional trauma that comes from um, news that was just very unexpected. So it's been quite the journey over the last year, but I've learned a ton, and I'm happy to share some of that with your audience here today.
Yeah, I think there's something that's so powerful and resonating, and I hope you all are kind of listening to, like, the cool thing about everything she just said is the power and kind of the discovery of where this unexpected path has kind of landed, and I think that's pretty cool. And she said the word trauma, and Laura, I have to just call it out because I think that's such a word, right? People are always like, "Hey, look at the positive, look at this," and it's traumatic and it's hard. And so I think that's so huge. What drives you? Why do you get up in the morning?
Yeah, well, if I could just say, if I could eradicate that statement of "don't take it personally, it's just business" from the plethora of society, I would sign me up for that, because everything about a layoff is personal, right? And I get it. It's a platitude. It's kind of like the thing that you say in those instances, but it's not helpful in any instance, right? People tend to focus on the financial aspects of getting laid off, right? And I get it. You need a new paycheck to support your family, pay the bills, etc. But I think what people really don't recognize is that in a layoff, you lose a lot more than just your paycheck. You lose a piece of yourself. And regardless of how confident you are, and count me in that group of people who has walked the fine line between confidence and cockiness my entire life, this experience just completely shattered me. And I found myself going through the stages of grief. And so you talk about traumatizing experiences similar to the death of a loved one. yes, this was also a death of my identity, of something that I held very dear and really associated with who Laura Krauss was a sales professional. Going through that emotional trauma of each of those stages is necessary. And I think I'm just trying to open up the conversation around that piece of layoffs that really isn't talked about today enough.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I think it's interesting. We all say, you know, well, for those of us that have experienced layoff, it's, hey, it's really, but I still think that there's sort of a taboo around it sometimes. And I can't, and as someone much like you, Laura, we've done a ton of hiring in our career overarchingly. And now it's like, hey, that's just a really antiquated way to look at the world when everyone that is making impact is being affected by a layoff at some point. I was talking to a friend of mine who's a VP of success just in the last week and a half, and he's like, hey, if you haven't ever been laid off, are you really making impact? That's kind of how my brain works. And I'm like, wow, okay, now I'm listening to you. That makes sense. But yeah, so I think one thing that I would really love to kind of dive into because it's super serious is what's your favorite thing to eat?
Oh, I'm glad you asked. If you look at my headline on LinkedIn, it says I'm a lover of God, charcuterie, and Legos. So I think I have to go with charcuterie.
Yes, that is right. For everyone listening to the show, Laura also and Laura, I would say, I don't say this often, but she's got me she even loves Legos, I think, a little more than me because she's got like all the organized bins
Yeah.
and stuff. So I feel like this is just part of the reason why I love Laura as a human, not to mention she's got an amazing, amazing book coming out and cares about people and all the things. Yeah, that's cool. Charcuterie is cool because it's just one of those things you can go grab to. And, Saturday is one of those things I don't want to cook. So just grab all the stuff, put it on a
It's never,
platter.
right? You can make it something new each and every time based on what you have in the pantry and in the fridge. So it's all good.
Yeah, yeah. So that's cool. That's cool. I always have to ask that question because I'm a foodie at heart. It's like the thing that drives me, which I know is kind of interesting in itself. But I love to eat and cook. I think it's important for community and all that fun stuff. And um, so I'm like, what what would you say out of your personal experience with layoff, right? And going through those stages of grief? I'm curious, like, what do you think is the lesson really kind of as you've worked through some of that stood out the most? I'm just, if you don't mind sharing that with us for those that might need to hear it.
Yeah, sure. So for those who aren't familiar with what those stages even are, you go through shock, denial, anger, bargaining, depression, testing, and acceptance. And I think the greatest lesson for me was that acceptance at the end of it really doesn't mean that there's any finality to it. Acceptance really is just, yes, this happened to me and I'm going to be okay. And I think that's really important because I think any kind of grief, whether it be the death of a loved one or the loss of a job, grief is not linear, meaning you're going to zig and zag throughout all of those stages. You're going to have triggers probably the rest of your life, and that's okay. That's normal. But it's all about recognizing that grief is something that you get through, not something you get over. And so I would share with the audience that your layoff is really just a mile marker. It is one adverse event that happened in your life. And if you look at the grand spectrum of things that happened over the course of your entire career, this is just one situation that you find yourself in. And if you look back to all of the different things that happened to you prior to your layoff, you can recognize that there were plenty of other adverse situations that you came out on the better side for. And so I would just have your audience recognize that yes, this can absolutely happen to me, but it's also not the end of me. It's really just me being able to pivot from this rejection and redirecting it to their next best thing.
Yeah, that's powerful. The redirection piece I've definitely found in my personal experience, right? It's one of the things that you coached, I think, is powerful. Finding something, you know, outside of yourself to do and kind of pivot energy, I think, into because I mean, honestly, that's kind of where this podcast came from. It was like, hey, I don't want to sit around and be sad anymore, you know? And so that's pretty much so that's powerful. So you've got you're building a ton of resources for people, right? Because whew, it is the struggle is real inside of our collective world, inside of tech, and how to give people resource and community and tools. um you've been fundamental in bringing that out of a corner and working your work and advocacy, I feel, is to bring that perception of taboo down and to give people all of that. Tell us about your community and some of that you're bringing in. We'll talk about the book next because I want to talk more about the book.
Yeah, absolutely. So the Layoff Cooties couch community is something that really just kind of grew organically over the last couple of months. We opened it up in late August, early September. We have over 100 members today. And I call
It's
it the
amazing. Yeah.
safest space to be able to connect with others who are healing from the emotional trauma of a layoff. It's actually a very encouraging space. We have coaches that come in that I bring in from the outside on various topics, 2 to 3 times per week. We have writing prompts for people to be able to share their stories. And this really came about, Dana, specifically because I was having hundreds of one on one conversations with people just reactionary from posts that I was writing over the last year. And I kept thinking, oh, wow, Mary is telling me this one story, and Bob just went through that. And Mary and Bob need to get to know each other and they can share their stories. And there's just so much healing power in being able to get the words out to other people who have actually been through the exact same experience. And it just completely eliminates that isolating feeling of you being all alone. And I just think community is so important. And we're seeing it come up more and more in so many different areas of our lives. And I'm just trying to bring, a very safe space to, like you said, to a very taboo topic for people to feel like they can come and get the healing power that they need by sharing their stories.
Yeah, and the thing I love about it is that, in your space, there's smart, you can see that, hey, you're smart, but guess what? There's other smart people too. And
Yeah,
so it's not, even though it is very personal in the feeling part, it's always feels a little better when you say to yourself, hey, they're smart people that have done great things at a global scale inside of tech, and this happened to them too. So it brings a kind of confidence, I think. Right?
absolutely. I'd say that's the number one issue that we work through with people. It's their lack of confidence that has been lost just through the layoff experience, whether it happened to them once, twice, or in some cases 3 or 4 times over the course of their career, right? We have a lot of folks in our community too who are experiencing layoffs for the first time, who have worked with companies for 10, 15, 20, 25 years. And this is now their first experience in this crazy market that we have, right? So not only just the lessons that you have to take from that, but then being thrown into this crazy market in and of itself is like a whole new level, right? So we work with a lot of folks on confidence building and getting rid of that imposter syndrome and just making sure people know just how awesome they are and that this is not something that they had any control of, and that they will and can find work again.
Yeah. Yeah. Because there's this voice, I think, at the back of your head when you've gone through this. And it's like, you know, in this market especially, right? So, you're interviewing for a job where there's 1,500, 2,000 candidates, and you're like, oh, well, I've been laid off. Why would they want to talk to me? Well,
Right.
like you say, if you have people that are smart, that are encouraging you, that say, hey, they're going to want to talk to you because you're really good at what you do. Um, and helping people to be able to understand the skills to tell their story, I think, is huge. And I mean, I think the work that you're doing is remarkable in that way too, helping people to really get out of. So the Phantom Toll Booth was a story I used to read as a child.
Yeah.
And the doldrums are these things that, if you just sit around and don't think about much and you're just sad all the time, they're these things that just kind of ooze. They look like green slime and they ooze all over Max's car. He drives a car. It's a cartoon car and he's trying to get to the land of like letters. And it's a kid show, obviously. Okay. I was like 7 guys and girls. But anyway, like I feel like your community and book are, when they think hard, the doldrums can't get into the car with them. They get pushed back. And so they're able to move forward and drive forward on their car, on their path. And these, little monsters, these doldrums, they can't get them because they're moving forward. And they're thinking and they're building and they're creating all the things, the hope, the motivation, the confidence. So anyway, just totally weird reference from Dana's childhood. So there you go, Laura.
It's interesting. I think if there's one thing that I hope people get out of my book is inspiration and hope. And yes, I do share my personal layoff story through the 7 stages of grief, and you learn all the things that happened just weeks prior as to why I think it was very much a politically motivated and targeted layoff. But that's really not the story. The story is in the hope and the inspiration in the final 2 chapters of, okay, how do you take this rejection now, which, let's face it, is a pretty big one. Somebody saying, we don't want you to work here anymore, right? For whatever reason. And now how do I take my 25 years of skills that I've developed in sales, right, over this time? And how do I now pivot in a new direction? And so for me, very quickly, I had my sales coaching and consultancy business up and running within 3 minutes. That'd be nice. 3 months of my after
That's
my
still incredible, though. 3 months. I mean, come on. That's amazing. Yeah.
It was, but I also realized that that was not the end all be all for me. Right. And it doesn't have to be. And that's really the message in my book too, is like, you're going to pivot so many times in your life. This is just one example of that. And that's okay. That's what life is all about. Like, own that.
Like the Friends show with the couch. Pivot, pivot.
Yeah.
No, that's cool. So, all right. So I think the book, right? Tell us about the book. You said you arrived at the journey where it was like, hey, I've got this consulting business. I spun it up in 3 months, which is amazing. That shows like what your skills are and how you were able to capture and connect with your clients in itself. But like, what kind of said, hey, I want to teach, I want to share, I need to get this message out?
Well, anybody who's in sales, at least if they're doing it the right way, knows that sales is all about helping people. And so for me, this was just a new way for me to help people. So I'm not doing it anymore working for a name brand software company. I'm doing it now helping people believe in themselves and helping them help themselves to really step into the better version of who they can really be. And I truly, truly believe, and I didn't believe this right after my layoff because I was in so much grief and so much trauma of everything that happened. I
Yeah.
truly, truly believe that these are the moments that will make or break people. And you have that choice as to whether or not you want to make it or if you want to be broken. And that step in and of itself is the first one that you have to make. It's all about mindset, and it's all about, the reframe in your mind. In my bargaining chapter, I talk about what if versus imagine if. I think it's just a really positive and great mindset in and of itself that works for anything. What if scenarios usually have some type of fear and unknown and doubt tied to them, kind of a negative connotation. Whereas imagine if is more creative, more supportive, more, where can this go in a more positive direction? And so I would advise people to kind of take their what if scenarios and change that into more of an imagine if question. And you'll see how much more of a positive connotation it can really be for your life to move forward.
Yeah. And I think if you've been through a layoff, the interesting thing about what you're saying and why it's so powerful is it's very easy to fall into that what if scenario. What if I don't find anything else? What if they don't ever see my value? What if I lose my house? What if I lose my car? What if I can't buy my children food this month? What if they find out that I'm side hustling as a substitute teacher? Like all this stuff, right? But if you think about it, like what you're proposing and what you share in the book, through this mindset change, then all of this, it can be an opportunity and it can be part of how, like you keep saying, I love this sort of, it always maps back to being your best self. I hear you say that a lot, just across your platform and as a human. And I think that's pretty remarkable. And, it's a tough time, because of COVID overhiring, AI, all of these things. Of course, the interest rates, You know, we're all in an interesting time, but I do like that framing of sink or swim from a let's figure out how to be, if you're going to be successful or kind of broken, and how to get to that and navigate it. I think your book helps with that, because if you're dealing with that PTSD around being laid off, you got to have something, in my humble opinion, to be able to get to the other side.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. And I think part of it too is, recognizing that you are not your job. Like for years, when you said Laura Krauss, you thought sales professional, at least in my mind, that's
yes, me too.
right.
Yeah.
That's not to take away from being, a wife and a mother and a daughter and a sister and all those other things that I bring to the table. But I just found so much value in myself with the things that I was achieving throughout my career. Right.
Right.
And so, when I work with my clients for the first time, I send them this exercise before we start working with them. It's called Alphabet Soup, and it's in my book. And I ask people to share 26 things about themselves. And you have to use a letter of the alphabet for each one. So a different word, right? And that exercise might sound so silly and childish to some, but it really gets you thinking of all of the things that you are and that you represent outside of just your career. And every single person that I've given that to has said, wow, I literally took a half an hour out of my day doing this exercise, and now I think so differently about myself, about all the wonderful things that I do bring to the table outside of just my career. And that's the whole focus of that exercise. And it's a simple one, but a lot of fun to do, and you can even do it with your kids.
So I'm curious. I can't. So you see me kind of smiling, because I mean, I felt that same way, right? And I can so empathize and connect with what you just said. I'm curious, why do you think we do that? Why is that because I mean, I can't agree more. It's kind of that default of how you want to, you have confidence because you're succeeding, you're a professional. And just as you said, there's all these other things that you're doing, but we don't focus on that as much as, like, I guess we should by default. It's very interesting to consider.
Yeah, my personal take on it, Dana, is the monetary value that we tie to it, right? The more money we make, the more successful we think we are in our eyes, right? And I
Yeah.
can tell you, going from a multi six figure W-2 to less than 10 grand a year is a very humbling experience. You wonder, was I really good at all of those things? Because now I'm not getting any money for it per se, like I was before, right? But I think that's just the society that we've grown up in, right? We become accustomed to all the materialistic things and the value that we put on our title and stuff that we accumulate and how much money do you make? What's your title, right? And until that stuff is really taken away from you, I don't think that people really think about it that much. And so for
Yeah.
me, I say that my job was as much of my identity as my big brown eyes. It was. And when that was taken away from me through no fault of my own, like through someone else's decision, I really had to take a step back and say, okay, who is Laura Krauss? What is the legacy I want to leave behind that's far beyond corporate walls? It's my kids, the human beings that I'm raising. It's the how I'm treating people, my service to others. It's that kind of stuff, which I always felt was part of my professional servant leadership as well. But until like that title and that monetary value is taken away from you, you really don't I think appreciate what you really can bring to the table.
Powerful stuff. So tell us about the book, because I know we've been talking about it here and there in the conversation. I know it's coming up soon. Release date's coming up. So talk to us about when and how we can get the book and all things within it, which I know obviously you can't do in the last 2 minutes of our time together, which I've been totally enjoying this conversation. But anyway, book, tell us.
Yes, thank you. So the Layoff Cooties, it's them, not you, can be found on Amazon on November 5th. I don't know why I chose Election Day, but supposedly, I don't know if you're tired of American politics, maybe you can come read about corporate politics. I don't know. Maybe there's some sitting there. But you can get a paperback version or a Kindle version, and then later in the month, it'll actually be available on online retail stores like Barnes and Noble, Target, etc. as well. You can also go to my website, which is rippleeffectsales.com, if you wanted a signed personal copy, and I'd be happy to send you one of those in paperback as well. And just really excited to get the book out there into the world. I've obviously been sharing excerpts and parts of it over the last couple of months as I've been writing it to try and get people excited and little teasers. But, look, this is my personal and professional legacy. I'm extremely proud of the book. And I'm even more excited to hear how my words can help impact others to really believe in themselves again.
That's amazing. So everybody listening, please, I know so many of you follow her journey and her content. She shares some just really cool, insightful, for lack of a better way to put it, just really hope inspiring, fun stuff, including Legos and charcuterie on on her LinkedIn. But, certainly after all the hustle and bustle of the election cycle, remember, especially, if you're in the layoff cycle or just dealing with post-traumatic layoff, from the stress and the mindset around that, maybe you're in your next role, but you just haven't quite gotten over it. You're not alone. I mean, she's building this community. She's got this book as a resource. I highly encourage you to take advantage of that so that, like she's talking about, you can be your best self, because at the end of the day, that's all that any of us can be. So Laura, thank you so much for joining us. It was awesome just to talk and chat. To say we're excited about the book is an understatement.
Thank you so much. It was really great to be here.
All right, Rebels, until next time, rebel your sass off, and we'll be talking soon. Catch you later.